Welcome back Stalkers and welcome back to a new video. So today we have a lot to talk about because patch 1.4 is live for Stalker 2, offering over 700 fixes for the game. And keep in mind that the main focus of this update was on combat itself, which is something that a lot of people were actually requesting. And look, I mean, when it comes to A-Life, AI and just how enemies react or play throughout in the zone in general, there are many things which should be addressed. Now luckily this patch addresses a lot of them. Now, I was lucky that this update came out really early for me, so I had the entire day to play through it and kind of check everything out. So I will be going through the biggest changes, but also keep in mind if you want to go through everything yourself, because there is truly a lot. I'm going to leave all of the links down below. And as I said, the first thing we're going to be talking about is AI, combat and mutants, because this was sort of a highlight of the update. So when it comes to mutants, they have a lot more animations now, and they are a bit more smarter when it comes to AI itself, meaning that first off, if there's any bodies nearby, which basically happens after some random encounters or any fights between, like, let's say some factions and mutants, and if they win, they're actually gonna be eating those bodies if they're close to them, which is, you know, nice to see because it makes logical sense from, like, just, you know, the lore and just the immersion standpoint, and also it's something that previous Stalker games had. And the good thing is that they have this alert state now, meaning that if something is happening near them, or if you're approaching a certain location where there are mutants, they're going to be a lot more dynamic now, searching for you, looking out what it is and so on, which is something I noticed in the game, because before it was usually they're gonna be in the idle state, and if you get close to them they're going to attack you, and that was about it. But when it comes to human combat, or well, if you're fighting different factions or NPCs, there are things here which kind of make more sense now, and even though they made like fighting a lot more dangerous, so this means that if they start shooting you now, you're gonna be losing your HP a lot faster, and especially on higher difficulties, it's something that I noticed myself, that I have to be a lot more careful in fights now, because I mean, they're still going to kind of shoot you from positions which don't really make sense, but that bullet damage has definitely went up. But there are things which kind of align with my own gameplay and something which they said here. So they fixed numerous bugs and problems with cover usage for NPCs. Now they can properly use available covers, they always try to hide before shooting, and don't rush forward when not needed. This was kind of necessary because usually before what happened is that enemies try to kind of run at you, circle you around a bit, but it wasn't that obvious. They were kind of just running towards you, which made it really easy for you to take them out. So now that's been happening, of course, but not as it was, prior to this update, because they can use trees as cover now, which is nice. That's something they haven't really used all that much before, and they updated these combat and cover animations to look more fluent and fast. Now, as they said here, they also improved flanking, pathfinding and transition to close combat, so that means that if you get close to some enemies, they're gonna start hitting you in melee now, which is kinda nice to see because it makes more sense. But the overall, like, pathing itself is a bit better than it was prior to this update. They also fixed issues in communication and action synchronization between characters in the squad, so that means they're not gonna be kind of randomly going around, but they're going to be a lot more cohesive in how they move and how they fight. And also something I noticed when it comes to communication between those NPCs is something that they also mentioned here in this patch notes, is that they're going to now communicate tactical action and reaction more clearly in combat, which makes more sense. That again, they're not just gonna be randomly going at someone or just having these random fights, which don't really make sense sometimes. And also big news when it comes to grenades. So what it was prior to this update is that NPCs had internal cooldown for grenades. So that means if you're kind of far away from them, once that cooldown expires, they're going to throw a grenade at you, even sometimes when it doesn't make sense. So this means now they're going to use that grenade to try and flush out the target and not just, shoot it randomly at you. But to be honest, even before, I noticed that when they, throw that grenade, I was usually in cover and they were very successful in, flushing me out. But now it's a lot more dangerous and they're still kind of precise in that sense. But good thing is that these squads now have the finite number of grenades depending on their rank and faction. Bandits have significantly less than military, which also makes sense because of the access they have to hardware and weapons and other things in general. So this means they're not going to spam those grenades, but rather they're gonna be be thinking before they throw it because, well, they don't have that many. And as I said, they added a lot more melee animations, so that means if any characters whatsoever actually approaches, mutants in melee, they're gonna start kicking them, which makes more sense. They're not just gonna shoot them if they're very close. Also, human characters can kick players who are crouched, that wasn't the case before this, and human characters look around for a brief moment searching for enemies after combat ends, then proceed to post-combat activities like looting and healing wounded, which is also something I noticed in the previous bigger update, but in this one it's a lot more, how would I say, nuanced, the point where it again makes more sense, as I mentioned before, and I think that's important for the immersion perspective, and just the flow of the fights becomes more realistic and kinda things become better in that sense. Also keep in mind, when it comes to shotguns, they have been finally nerfed when it comes to NPCs, because even though shotguns themselves, IRL, don't really act only in close range, so depending on which ammo you use for the shotgun, they can act differently, but they're not gonna be able to basically like snipe you from long distances with shotguns, because that wouldn't make sense, because even some of them were not using the right ammo for this. So this means that they fixed problems with pellet dispersion and the non-natural ballistic distances. Also, one of the things you can notice in the gameplay itself is that they increased the number of generic heads for NPC randomization. This means there is going to be more variety, because one of the things I noticed is that sometimes you're going to have, like, if there is a squad, you're going to have like 3 NPCs who are gonna be looking the same, so that's kinda cool. Also, builders now can use their telekinetic abilities to catch and throw grenades, so watch out. And they improved the weapon stat displaying in the inventory. As you can see it, they updated weapon stats bars and their calculation logic, and they added a new weapon stat, handling, which I think was very important. Also, they fixed the erratic behavior of A-life NPCs after attacking enemy layers. They fixed the issue where A-life NPCs didn't move after transitioning to offline. This was important. This is something I noticed, because initially when they started introducing patches to A-life system itself, they increased the number of, like, let's say, random encounters you have throughout the zone, and in the next patch after that they nerfed it a lot, which made the zone feel a lot more, how would I say, empty than it did on that update, and that's a problem I have been talking about for quite some time. So it seems that the big problem for that is that the NPCs or AI simply was not moving if you're not close to them, because one of the things with A-life system, they're supposed to like do stuff, and there's, the world is supposed to run even if you are not there. Also, they improved the mutant behavior during combat a bit, mostly when it comes to the way they attack you, the way they run around you, and so on. So that's kinda okay in that sense, but I think in general that they should really increase the number of these random encounters, because even after this update, it's getting better because, well, obviously now they move, but I still feel like there should be a lot more mutants on the map itself, at least in the distance sometimes, which is kinda important for that immersion standpoint. Also, they fixed an issue when NPCs could be stuck in the ambush pose. Kinda funny, that's something I think even previous Stalker games had, and they adjusted the aim for the NPCs that are in low cover, so they're not going to be laser pointing at your head anymore in that sense. Now, they also fixed an issue when the NPCs could stay idle after receiving critical damage. Very important, this was fixed. This was happening, quite some time if you're fighting human enemies, and they adjusted the shooting range of NPCs depending on their weapon, which makes more sense, because previously I felt, regardless of what weapon they had, I felt like every single weapon was going at me with the same trajectory, same distance, and there wasn't really a lot of variety there, because now NPCs have to move closer to you if they're using a shotgun, and not just, for example, go from far away. But let's say if an enemy has an assault rifle or maybe a sniper, now they're going to be a lot more careful, and they're gonna be taking their positions further back so they can start shooting at you, which is kinda nice. When it comes to balancing, there are a lot of changes here, but I'm gonna be going through the biggest highlights. So first off, the RPM 74 has increased armor piercing value, which makes more sense. Explosions now cause more damage on high ranking targets, which makes more sense again, because at the end of the day it is a grenade, and I felt sometimes like I was throwing marshmallows on like enemies, especially later on once they get a lot stronger and once you start fighting factions which are not going to be bandits. They increased the RPG damage, they decreased lethal distance for grenades, they increased concussion distance for RPG. They also added some silencers into stashes, so now if you're going through different regions, you're gonna be finding a lot more of them. I think through my gameplay, like first one, I think I found one in a stash or two max, but I think most of them were basically bought from traders, so yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to that. They also added, of course, the possibility to upgrade the Zircon suit, so that's something very useful for a lot of people, and they fixed an issue where player was able to install physical protection upgrades twice for the PZC-9 Falcon armor. They also rebalanced some stashes in the Saturn region and improved regeneration and spawn of random anomalies after a mission, because it makes more sense. After missions, most of the artifacts should respawn or start respawning, and it wasn't happening all that much, because after rigorous testing on like previous update, regardless of like if an emission happens or not, it was usually just a few days and then that artifact, you know, respawns. There wasn't any logic to it whatsoever. Also, bug fixes, crashes and performance saw a lot of different changes. One of the things that they actually added within this game is during the night you might see a shooting star, so that's something that's actually new in the game itself. But regardless of that, let's talk about these bug fixes. So they made performance optimization of light and shadows in multiple regions and locations, because this was causing a lot of issues. They improved the level of details for grass in multiple regions, because that wasn't happening, and honestly sometimes was kind of ruining the immersion, because the grass was just low quality on the ground regardless if you're close to it or not. And the transition between the changes in level of detail is now a bit more optimized, so it makes more sense. Also, a lot of those fixes were under the hood, like CPU and GPU performance and optimization tweaks, which made like the general like feel of the game be a bit better, which I noticed that in some regions, for example, especially more populated regions, it's not that my frame rate got increased all that much, is that it's more that these pockets of like the zone where the FPS would drop drastically is now working a lot better in that sense. Also, for all of you who were rushing to go to Pripyat, keep in mind that they fixed an issue where a player was able to go to Pripyat ahead of time by jumping over the railroad cistern on Yaniv, so that's not longer the case. They also fixed an issue where a broken weapon did not have a red background when equipped, so that's kind of a more just to make things more clear if you're using any broken weapons, especially the ones which may you pick up from enemies after a fight. They also fixed an issue where mutants with telekinetic abilities were unable to pick up or throw items or people directly at player, which was the case in previous Stalker games, so that wasn't the case here. And you know, sometimes when you fight you can definitely see that, for example, they're going to pick up, like let's say a can or something to throw at you, but that can just kind of falls into place or just kind of gets stuck in some maybe objects or whatever. So now it's a bit more difficult. And also keep in mind, if you were wondering why Bion didn't do any damage during his jump attack, well, it's because it was broken and now it's fixed, so be careful. When it comes to technical side of the update, they improved, as I said, pathing for NPCs, not just in combat, but also when they're idling or just walking around certain areas. They also have some minor polishing and improvement for scripted NPC animations, so that's good. And human characters that turn on flashlights now are slightly more illuminated and visible in the dark, which again makes more sense if you're gonna be fighting enemies in dark and you want to maybe avoid some people or just, you know, see if you're gonna be fighting them where they reveal their position with that flashlight. They improved the sound obstruction for grenades thrown outside from indoors location. They added a new emission shelter in the chemical plant dining room, so keep in mind that area was kinda empty when it came to you running to a certain cover, which covers in this game work a bit differently than they did in previous Stalker games, where you have to be in a really tight location now or in one of these safe rooms to survive in a mission. Honestly, sometimes I felt like when I was in a location which was enclosed from all sides and I felt like I was safe, that wasn't the case, and I still think that some of these things should be looked at, because from the emission sense it doesn't makes sense that you take damage in those areas. They also added the emission shelter to technical room at the ranger station, so Zaton region, so keep in mind. They improved the facial animations and realism to make more of that immersion standpoint. They improved the impact sounds for the bolt, That's cool. And they removed the redundant blur effect on players' vital stat panel during trade. Thank you so much for that. Now, they also added the player's vital stats panel in the trade menu, so that's kind of a cool thing. And they added new death animations and sound effects for electricity, acid, bullet, and red bites damage. Funny thing though is that they actually fixed an issue where shooting at sausage props produced blood particles. Yes, that was the case. It was probably kinda categorizing that as meat or NPC in general, so maybe that was the case. And they fixed an issue where ducks could fly into the water after being shot at. Yes, that was the case. Now, speaking of main side quests and open world encounters, a lot has been actually fixed here again. As always, these quests, I swear, like sometimes I think they're going to need at least 1 to 2 more patches for them to kind of sort these things out, but it's been getting better, especially because they're getting rid of some of the obstacles where people were stuck and they could not progress the game at all. Now, keep in mind that this section of the video has some spoilers because I'm going to be talking about some of those main story and side activities fixes, so just skip ahead if you don't want to see it. So one of the things I experienced, and the thing is, honestly, like, this is more of a funnier side because it wasn't really ruining the immersion too much, but they fixed an issue with an unresponsive Korushnov being in A pose after the boss fight during the down below mission, which honestly, T pose, A pose, they're always kind of there regardless of what game it is, but yeah. Now, of course, our favorite quest, once more onto the breach mission, always has issues every single time they fix something about it. They fixed an issue where Faust was not appearing on the roof of the comm center during boss fight in once more onto the breach mission if player distracted him with a grenade. Yes, that was also the case. And also, one of the things that people were kind of mentioning in my comments in my previous video is that they fixed an issue where Snork's color was not counted as collected if Snork's corpse is already despawned in the name of science mission, so keep in mind, if you're having this issue, it should be fixed now. And another problem that people were experiencing in my comments is the last step mission, where they would basically get stuck between 2 bunker doors in airlocks, you know, during that, so hopefully now this should be fixed. Sadly, I could not actually like repeat this bug, and I had it, you know, prior to this update when I was revisiting the game and going through these quests again, because I have save games like next to these problematic locations, so I always go and revisit them. Now it's working, but let me know down below if it's not working for you, because sometimes they do this fix and people still report they're having issues. As far as crashes go, I mean, pretty okay. I didn't really have a lot of crashes with these patches, but I know people who had. But to be honest, like it should be running a bit better for people now, because again, they reported they fixed over 70 like different crashes which were happening throughout the game, including those UE5 crashes where you basically get like that message across your entire screen if the game crashes, so it should be better now. But the thing is, this is very subjective from like person to person how they play, but you can let me know down below in the comments if this is actually fixed for you or not. When it comes to audio itself, they improved the audio environment at S.t.a.l.k.e.r hub location, so that's cool. They fixed an issue where masked NPCs' voices did not have any audio filter applied. Thank you for this. When interrupting their generic dialogues in hubs, this is good. This was taking me out, to be honest. This one kind of caused issues for me. I know this is a minor thing, kind of redundant in that sense, but I'm glad this is fixed. They also fixed an issue where sounds of raindrops were playing for certain props located underground, so I didn't really experience this issue, or maybe I just didn't hear it, but now this has been fixed as well. Of course, besides this, there are many like level art and level design improvements for each region in the game itself. A lot of this has to do with like just smaller things, but you're not going to really experience them straight away. This is going to be something rather that, you know, it might appear, might not in your playthrough, for example, but at least they're working actively on it to make each location throughout the game feel more better in a sense. And just if there is any issues in the, for example, the terrain, how certain props are done throughout it, those are being fixed as well, and some of the locations, like smaller ones which I noticed, also saw some improvements, so that's cool. And also in general, I noticed that there is a lot less clipping between NPCs now, and that's something they also mentioned in this update as well. But in general, most of this was for combat itself, so it makes more sense that combat now is going to be a lot more deadlier, because they're going to have all of these new animations and they're not gonna be walking, clipping through each other, and they're going to be a lot more aware of everything which is happening around them. Now, my opinion about all of this is that yes, combat is feeling a bit more dangerous now, especially when I'm fighting mutants, not so humans. I mean, yes, they do more damage now, and like they're gonna be a lot more aware, as I said, of their environment and you as a player. But yes, if you're gonna be going in the open and try to shoot the enemies, they're going to take you out really quickly, especially on higher difficulties, which for me makes more sense, because I kind of felt like the highest difficulties in this game were not that difficult, so now you have to kind of think twice before each engagement. But keep in mind, when it comes to stealth itself, they've been addressing that in the previous patch, but I still noticed that because those enemies were a lot more deadlier, I tried to do like a more stealthy approach, and again, from time to time I noticed that enemies saw me, even though there was no way at all they could see me getting close to them because I was behind them, but somehow they turn around and they see me even when I was behind a certain bush or maybe a certain obstacle. So I think those things definitely require a lot more attention too, so that the stealth segment of it, if you're at least trying to get, some surprise on that enemies, should be a bit better in that sense, but the rest is shaping up to be, more and more kind of what people want. Now again, I do plead to GSC when it comes to A-Life that they should increase the number of encounters you have in the game, because I still noticed, even though I'm seeing a lot more people, A-Life is kind of getting into that shape, I still noticed that in some cases, especially for example in Zayton itself, it was relatively empty compared to other regions throughout the map, and I wasn't really getting in that many fights. Honestly, I was going back with a lot of loot on me, I was walking really slow, and throughout my entire path towards Skadovsk or Sultansk in that sense, I noticed that I was not attacked by anyone whatsoever. And when it comes to the actual optimization and frame rate in general, look, I mean, for me frame rate kinda stayed the same. As I said, you can see it on the screen itself. I think maybe locations which are more populated, as I said, with a lot of NPCs, especially these meta-humans that UE5 uses, I think that the stabilization is a bit better, but I still feel like something should be done here to kind of optimize everything and fine-tune it so that this transition between this open area and these hubs doesn't drop my frame rate for about 10 to 15, which was happening a lot before, but now it maybe drops it 5, 8 frame rate in general. But of course, all of these things are also depending on your hardware which you have, so I mean, you can let me know down below your frame rate and your maybe hardware which you are using, like which GPU, which CPU you're using. And also, I'm really interested to see how this game performs right now on Xbox. I couldn't check it sadly as I don't have Xbox, but you can let me know down below in the comments themselves. And two more things actually for the end. These are kind of big news, especially when it comes to modding. So something I have been following for quite some time now, even before Valve decided to allow developers to private their behind the scenes QA branches on Steam, I noticed that they were actually collaborating with Mod.io. So they said this a few days ago, or well, Mod.io said this: "We've established love and passion for STALKER game and their modding community. So we're incredibly proud to confirm our collaboration with GSC to bring official cross-platform mod support to STALKER 2 later this year. We'll see you in the zone." These are definitely great news, because having cross-platform mod support is amazing, and because they want to release proper modding tools for this game, I'm pretty sure that the modding community is going to take this and turn it into something really special. But also keep in mind, when it comes to anything console related mods there, you have to realize that the mods you're going to have on PCs, which are going to maybe on Mod.io or Nexus or whatever, they're going to be a lot more free in what you can do there, because if you're putting any sort of user generated content on Xbox servers and later on when this releases on PlayStation 5 on Sony servers, they're not going to allow everything. So most of these things have to be lore friendly and not something which is going to infringe on someone's IP, because these guys, they have to be really careful around these things, but at least these are really good news. And also for the end, keep in mind the Stalker Trilogy on PC, Xbox and PlayStation will receive a free upgrade to Stalker's Legend of the Zone Trilogy Enhanced Edition on May 20th, 2025, so in 5 days. This is going to give you new shaders, lighting, textures, gamepad support, Steam Deck, Steam Workshop and a lot more. Obviously, as soon as this free update for the Legends of the Zone Trilogy Enhanced Edition is out, I will make a video on it, and it's going to be really cool, especially because they have Steam Workshop enabled in it, so that's kind of cool to see. I'm honestly really excited to go back and replay the first trilogy again, because it's been a while. I think the last time I replayed them was prior to Stalker 2 coming out, so I could definitely go and do it one more time. So that's it for today. We have gone through a lot. I will of course have more videos and news about Stalker 2 as things come out, so stay tuned by subscribing and let me know down below in the comments what you think about all of this. And again, I don't want to go for too long because these videos tend to be really long, especially going through all of these patch notes, and I didn't want just to go and read throughout patch notes and say bye. I actually wanted to go really throughout the game, test it out as much as I could, but of course when it comes to some of the bugs and glitches, it is really hard or impossible to like recreate them in my own playthrough. That's pretty subjective, like from, you know, gameplay to gameplay. So yeah, that's as much as I have for this video. So thank you for watching, huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters, and as always, get out of here, Stalker.